Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Legendary Wizards podcast, a special presentation of the Windsor Wizards Broadcast Network. I am your host, Mike Thompson, and today we're diving into one of the most unforgettable athletic seasons Windsor High School has ever seen. Now, I know what you're thinking. The first episode of a podcast about the history of Windsor sports has to be about the 1924 Windsor Bulldogs who won a national championship. But you would be wrong. Instead, this inaugural episode is about the spring of 2021 and arguably the most successful season of Windsor soccer in its history. So let's talk about the spring of 2021, a time when high school sports didn't just return, they roared back. After a year of cancellations and postponements, schedule reshuffles, and uncertainty, the Windsor boys and girls soccer programs took the pitch in the same season and delivered a combined performance that can only be described as historic. That's right, both teams played in the spring. Both went undefeated in the regular season. The boys brought home a state title, and the girls came within a heartbeat of doing the same. We'll unpack the season, highlight some jaw-dropping stats, and hear from head coach Phil Weiser, who helped guide the boys to the title. So lace up, folks. This is a story of resilience, grit, and wizard-level excellence on the pitch. With us today is the man at the helm of the boys program, head coach Phil Weiser. Coach, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's start at the top. The 2021 spring season, a wild shift from the usual fall spot. How did you and your team handle that change?
Oh, man, that was rough. When I still remember when they shut us down, we were doing some preseason training. We had to make sure the boys were all 6 feet apart from each other, and so it was already kind of a different start to the season, and then we ultimately got the order to just shut things down, and so it kind of became a wait-and-see approach. We found out that our season was going to be moved to the spring, so it became a concern that we could essentially keep the schools open to get to our season. Luckily, we were able to do that for most of the school year, and we started our preseason a week earlier than usual. We were kind of afraid as coaches that our kids had been sitting around without much to do, and so we were going to need more time to get them in shape, and so we ran a 2-week preseason that year. Pretty intense preseason because we knew we were at a level where we could achieve some great things, and we drove them into the ground for those 2 weeks and hit the season on a full sprint and kind of just took it from there.
Perfect. Well, the numbers don't lie. You finished the regular season undefeated, and not only that, you never trailed in a single match. That's unheard of. What can you say about the team's effort during the regular season?
It was interesting. The coaches knew this was going to be a special team from the time that senior class were freshmen. So we had been building up for this season knowing it, and the boys, I don't think, were quite sure how good they were. And that first game against Centaurus, it was real interesting. Where everyone's uneasy. They've got those neck buffs around their necks where they got to pull them up during set pieces anytime they're going to be close. And it was just like a lot of tension going into that first game, a lot of uncertainty with the boys. And I believe we ended up beating them 4-0. And Centaurus was a good team. And so that kind of opened their eyes. And for the next few weeks, it was a lot of the coaches convincing the boys, you are good enough to do this. We aren't shooting just to qualify for the state tournament. We're just not going for a league title. We're going for a state title. And once they started to believe that, it just kind of picked up momentum. There were 2 times in that season where I thought that perhaps we might go behind, and one was against Holy Family. they ended up actually coming back and tying us and sending that game to overtime. And a quick refocus in between overtime and the end of regulation got the boys squared away, and they came out and put a goal in, I think, in like the first 5 minutes of overtime to win it, and then against Silver Creek. And that was just a physical game where they came back, and it looked like they were maybe going to get close to tying us, but they're a bit of a rival, and as soon as it started getting physical, we were just a bigger, stronger team and kind of squashed it then, I guess I'll say.
So you finish out the regular season and you storm into the postseason and cap it off with a state title. What do you remember most about that championship game in Colorado Springs?
Oh, there's so much I remember about that game. I remember just being in the tunnel under the stadium before we went out on the field, and it's a very narrow tunnel. They've got us lined up on the left side, Denver North lined up on the right side, and you could just see in the tunnel that we were a bigger, stronger team than them. And some of the Denver North guys had decided to put eye black on.
War paint.
Yeah, and it didn't look as intimidating as I think they had hoped for. And I just remember being in that, and some of our boys just screaming. Seth Ellingson screaming, "What day is it? Game day!" And other boys just banging up against the wall. And you could tell from that start that we were a little bit more up for that game. Interestingly, right off the kickoff, they broke away on us and got in 1v1 versus our goalkeeper, like literally seconds into the game, and just got in 1v1 versus Daniel Boma, and he made an absolute monster save, which then proved to be their best chance of the entire game. I remember, going into halftime 0-0. And adjusting tactics to get a little bit more direct. We were just going to kind of boot the ball down the field and see if we could play on their half a little bit more, and it ended up working out for us, and we got a corner kick in there, and everyone thought John Burnett scored the goal because he picked up the habit of, after our goals, running straight to the bench and celebrating, but he actually assisted the goal to Matt Hansen. And it was Matt Hansen's, I'm pretty sure, first and only varsity goal he scored in his entire career. And Matt was just a hard-working player who did all the dirty work. And so the fact that he scored the winning goal meant a lot, I think, to him, to the team, to the coaches, because all year he had done all the hard stuff so our attacking players could get us to that point. And so, him putting in that goal, I think, is just a good a good finish to an amazing story.
Perfect. And someone that you mentioned, this isn't one of my questions included, but just want to talk about this young man. How impressive was John Burnett? Start to finish throughout the season, just as a young man. Tell me your thoughts on John.
Oh, man, John Burnett came in as a freshman and was a difference maker. I remember, starting him as a central midfielder as a freshman and looking over to one of my assistants, Chris Simmons, and just being like, we haven't taken him off the field yet. And I don't know that we should take him. And this is him as a freshman. By the time he became a senior, we put him up as a center forward because John Burnett was bigger and stronger than most of the people he played. He was faster than most of the people he played. He had a better touch on the ball than most of the people he was legitimately the total package. And that man could put us on his back and carry us when we needed him to. His goal he scored to seal The quarterfinal game against Erie, a rival team, is to this day probably the best goal I've seen scored in a high school soccer game. It was just an absolute laser from about probably 40 yards out. I remember in the final game, he had worked himself so hard, he had to come off the field, and it was a hot day that day, and we needed to get the trainer some fluids in him, and it was literally, get out. He says to me, I think I'm about to pass out. So we got some fluids in him, and like 3 minutes later, he was like, Coach, I'm ready, and he went back in, and like I said, he got the assist that won the game for us. He is easily the most special player I have had the honor to coach in my career.
Well, I can tell you, he was pretty dang fun to watch. As someone who was in the stands, on the sidelines, whatever it may be, he was a special player for sure. So, thinking about legacy, what do you hope history remembers about this 2021 team?
You know, I obviously, we talked a lot about how we had to make our own history, that there wasn't there had been a history of Windsor soccer, but up to that point, the furthest that any team had made it to was the quarterfinals. And what we needed to show the kids who followed out was how to get to the promised land and win. And so what I hope they showed the kids who walk through these halls is it can be done. But what it took 25 boys, because that was the maximum roster size you could carry that year because of COVID protocols. And so we maxed out the size of the roster we could keep in that bubble, and every single one of them was focused on one thing, and winning that state title. And it didn't matter if you were John Burnett, you know, the star of the team, the Colorado Player of the Year, or you were Matt Hansen, you know, the kid who had to do all the dirty work, or, you know, you were the player who didn't get off the bench. Danian Price was a sophomore that year. He didn't touch the field once we got into the state tournament. And Danian was going to go on and be a captain of the team, you know, so he was going to have his time, but for that run there, he was going to work his butt off on practice, and he may not see the field, but he had a role in that team, and everyone was just focused on doing their role. And that's what it takes, you know. It takes a full team committed to one goal and willing to give up everything to achieve that goal.
All right. Coach Phil Weiser, congratulations again, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Mike. You're the best, buddy.
If the boys' season was a prestige, the Windsor girls soccer team brought their own version of spring magic. Right on the heels of the boys' championship, the girls took the field in May 2021 and kept the momentum going with one of the most commanding regular seasons we've ever seen. 10 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws. That's right, a perfect 10-0 record. And just like their male counterparts, the girls didn't just win, they dominated. The team scored a staggering 62 goals while conceding only 3. And through every minute of regulation of play, they never trailed, not once. This is a team in every sense of the word. Players like Cardi Kingsbury scoring 10 goals that year, or Leah Scott, 7 shutouts, along with a deep bench and sharp coaching, turned every game into a statement. In the playoffs, they powered their way into the state quarterfinals, where they faced the eventual state champions, a team just as fast, physical, and hungry. I was at that game, and it was a match for the ages. Intense, physical, and tied at the end of regulation. And for the first time all season, in overtime, Windsor trailed. A single goal, a single moment, heartbreak. The game ended 2-1, and just like that, the season was over. But here's the thing. That loss doesn't define them. If anything, it cements their place in Windsor athletics history. This team was one of many in a girls' soccer program that won 12 conference championships in a row between 2012 and 2024, and won their own state championship in 2018. But more on that team at a later date. The 2021 Wizards went undefeated in the regular season, kept every single opponent scoreless or behind for every minute of regulation, and only fell in overtime to the best team in the state. When both programs play at that level, back to back, in the same semester, you don't just talk about talent, you talk about culture, about the drive, the discipline, and the pride that runs through this school, this town, and these athletes. It's not just impressive, it's legendary. So let's take a step back. 2 teams, 2 perfect regular seasons, 1 state championship, and not a single minute spent trailing until the final overtime of the final playoff game. If that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what will. The 2021 Windsor Spring Soccer season will go down as one of the most remarkable stretches in school sports history, not just because of the stats or the trophies or even the undefeated runs, but because of what it represented. After a year of cancellations, quarantines, empty stadiums, and uncertainty, soccer brought us back. It gave these athletes a purpose. It gave fans something to cheer for. It gave the Windsor community a shared story to be proud of. And for the boys and girls who laced up their cleats, wore the maroon and gold, and gave everything they had, this season is something they'll carry with them forever. Not just for the wins, but for the resilience, the discipline, the team-first mindset that made this spring possible. A huge thank you again to Coach Phil Weiser for sharing his time and memories with us. And to both teams, you reminded all of us why high school sports matter. To the players, coaches, teachers, and fans, thank you. The bar is high, and that's exactly where it should be. This has been Mike Thompson, and you've been listening to our special spotlight on Windsor's unforgettable spring soccer season of 2021. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Windsor Wizards Broadcast Network. And be legendary, Wizards.